A lot of people ask me about damp proofing. Why is it that it can increase the risk of mould and condensation and indeed dampness in a property? Well, this is a prime example. The property is clearly nowhere near groundwater. You can see it's about a metre above the outside ground level. It's in London where you don't have groundwater because groundwater's pumped out, and it's above a zone where there's no groundwater. So even if the groundwater wasn't pumped out, it still wouldn't be at risk. It's on a hill. It has no rivers running underneath it that, although wouldn't produce groundwater, it could cause flooding. But there's no reason why you would have groundwater in this area, and yet the property's been damp proofed. The problem with damp proofing, and let me start by saying that the root cause of mould is always excess vapour. That is where the internal dew point, which is a measure of the amount of vapour, is above the outside temperature. If you have the internal dew point above the outside temperature on a cold wall, such as the corner here, you're going to have high surface relative humidity resulting in mould and or condensation. It's made worse because you don't have a radiator near there. It's been blocked by the bed. Heat's been blocked by the bed. It's made worse because it's exposed on the north side. There's a cupboard that stops airflow. But it is always the excess vapour that's the root cause. And the excess vapour is because the kitchen extractor fan isn't always used. It works well, but it isn't always used, probably because it's a little noisy, but all extractor fans are. The bathroom extractor fan is not good. You don't necessarily need to turn the lights on to have a shower there because it's quite light. And there's no overrun on it. And also, I suspect people are inevitably going to be drying clothes internally and probably not using a 20-litre dehumidifier. So dehumidifier is going to be part of your solution. And I would have one in both elements of the dwelling because they're separate families. But in addition to that, you should do things like I would change the extractor fan upstairs in the bathroom, have a continuous flow extractor fan. I would have a spring on the door to force people to keep it closed on the bathroom door and potentially the kitchen door, and ask people to use the kitchen extractor fan. Even if it's on the low level, briefly, it's better than nothing. And always obviously use a dehumidifier whenever drying clothes internally or whenever the internal vapour is above the outside temperature. I would also use data loggers. I think your friends will be able to help you in the first instance. Long term, you may think about using Wi-Fi ones. Or in fact, indeed, you can use a data logger that you can collect the data from outside the property without disturbing anyone. So that's a simple solution. So if you know what the internal vapour is compared to the outside temperature, then you know it's either been ventilated properly or insufficiently. But in the first instance, what you want to do is get rid of the mould, because mould will have higher concentrations of spores when it's already growing, so increase the risk of mould growing elsewhere. So I'd use anti-mould spray such as HG anti-mould spray. You may or may not think of painting it. That's fine. It doesn't cause a problem. We talked about the fact that the chimney breast would have increased the heat loss in that area, and that's true. But again, that's not the root cause. The root cause is the excess vapour. Likewise, water getting in through the external render and or paint, it increases the dampness on the outside wall, and a damp wall is a poor insulator, increasing the risk of mould. Oh yes, to jump forward or back to why damp proofing increases the risk of mould and dampness, it's because damp proofing, you put in an impermeable material. Impermeable does not absorb the vapour. So it's a bit like blowing into a plastic bag compared to blowing into a paper bag. Paper bag won't get condensation compared to a plastic bag because the paper's absorbing the moisture. You get all those rings of condensation on a paper bag. Plastic bag And also, so it's not absorbing, but also you're taking all the little pores out, and those pores are insulation. So by reducing the insulation, you increase the heat loss and therefore increase the surface relative humidity. And just maybe 1 or 2 degrees can make all the difference. And not only are you wasting energy, but also you are attracting condensation and mould. So a dehumidifier is a win-win in that it reduces your energy consumption because you're reducing your vapor levels. A cold, dry property feels warmer than a cold, damp property. Or think of it conversely, a cold, damp property feels much colder than a cold, dry property. So you can reduce the amount of energy that you consume and feel as warm. Also, a damp wall is a poor insulator, so increased heat loss. And in addition, whenever going away, you should have a dehumidifier with a drain dripping into the sink, because it's much cheaper to keep a property dry with a dehumidifier than with heating. So have a look at the data loggers. So here's the data logger system. It's at damp.ai/detect. I've already loaded the files, but you can take all 3 files, you can upload them and then select which one. So I'm comparing the large room. The temperature at the time of the survey was 14 degrees centigrade, 12 o'clock. And graph it now. With this graph, there is no major problem because this is the surface relative humidity, and at the time of the survey, the period from the 13th to 19th of May, it rises to about 75%. So it's way off the 85% where you get mold. However, we are springtime, arguably summertime, and in fact, the dew point, this dark blue line, is more or less in line with the external dew point, suggesting very good ventilation. So this period, I would say, is pretty excellent ventilation, but in winter, that's not going to be the case. And you would not have mold if you were having this level of ventilation. So it's clearly an issue that's taking place in the winter. So if we look at this grey line, this is the dew point differential line, and where it's got spikes down, it's because that's when vapor is being generated in the kitchen relative to the large room. If we look at the bathroom, so upstairs is close to the bathroom, so we'll just have a look to see what it is like and graph that, and actually, you know, you're not getting as many spikes there, but there are some periods when the vapor has been generated in near to the bathroom. But really what you want to do is see what's happening over time, and as I say, you can only get mold from excess vapor made worse by heat loss, poor airflow from the radiators, and having the beds next to the radiator is going to stop the heat coming through from the radiators. So just some distance away will dramatically improve the transfer of heat from the radiators. And obviously HG mold to remove the mold and think about insulation. But the key thing is to bring the humidity down, and a dehumidifier and running the extractor fans and better kitchen bathroom extractor fan will help a lot as well. So thank you very much, and very simple solution. Keep your vapor down by increasing ventilation and dehumidification, and think about insulation, but that's secondary to the dehumidification and the ventilation.